Diocletian may very well have saved the Roman Empire by his efforts. By restabilizing the military, creating a new bureaucracy, and eventually dividing the empire into a tetrarchy, he had saved it from the fires and the devastation of the crisis of the 3rd century. But in dividing the empire, many believe that Diocletian weakened it. Creating a junior and senior emperor in both the eastern and western halves, he had made sure that the western half and the eastern half would be split from here on out, changing the course of history. In the west, the junior emperor, Constantius, serving Maxentius, died in 307 and was replaced by his son Constantine, who had greater ambitions. After Constantius died, his army declared their allegiance to Constantine in 306 at Ibracum in Britannia, modern-day York in England, and Constantine decided to challenge Maxentius for control of the western half of the empire. It would lead to one of the greatest battles in Roman history and a turning point watershed moment for both the Roman Empire and Christianity and Constantine himself. The night before this battle of Milvian Bridge in 311, Constantine received a sign in the sky with the first 2 letters of Jesus Christ's name, the Chi Rho, and a voice from heaven saying, "In this sign ye shall conquer." Constantine, although not very religious, followed the traditions of his mother, who was a devout Christian, and made sure to embolden the shields of his soldiers with this great symbol, and used it in the battle the next day. The ensuing victory would change the world, as Maxentius was defeated and Constantine became the sole ruler of the western half of the empire. The victory would change history, the Christian Church, the Roman Empire, and Constantine himself. Holding on to the traditions of his mother had turned out to be a wise decision, and allying himself with the fastest-growing religion and one of the most peaceful in Rome made Constantine very popular. In 313, to reward the Christians, he legalized the religion, ending its persecutions with the Edict of Milan. This was a turning point, and a complete reversal of the heavy persecutions the Church had suffered sporadically for the first 2.5 centuries of its existence, especially those under Diocletian and Maxentius just a few years prior. Constantine honored his mother by doing this, as Helena traveled across the Middle East looking for the signs of Jesus' life, including the cross. And the Christian bishops allied themselves heavily with Constantine and would continue to be an influence in the empire until its demise. Constantine's victory at the Milvian Bridge was not the last of his military victories. He defeated Licentius in 324 and became the sole ruler of the Roman Empire, establishing himself and the Constantinian dynasty. Now in charge of the entire empire, as he began to build his new capital, the issues of Christianity, the largest religion in the empire, were now the issues of the state. In 325, Constantine called together the Council of Nicaea to settle the issue of whether Christ was fully divine or created by the Father. This had led to schism in the Christian Church and the empire. And with the council deciding that Christ was of the same substance with the Father, the issues of the Church and the issues of the state were intertwined, including Constantine's own conversion, which happened at his deathbed when he was baptized. He continued to rule over the empire, creating a new capital, a Nova Roma, over the city of Byzantium, known as Constantinople. Right at the Straits of the Black Sea, it was a new capital and meant to connect the empire. It also brought more attention to the eastern half of the empire, which would survive the barbarian onslaughts of the 5th century and has become one of the most beautiful and well-renowned cities in all of history. Meanwhile, its chief architect continued to enjoy his power and prestige, becoming one of Rome's most accomplished and greatest emperors, beginning a new dynasty and a new era in Roman history. He passed away in 337, right after receiving baptism and after reigning for over 30 years. By the time of his death, Rome was strong, the Church was strong, and Constantine was stronger than all. In many ways, Constantine had reshaped the Roman Empire, giving it a new religion, a new capital city, and a new dynasty comprised of the great leaders' own flesh and blood. For the first time in centuries, a Roman emperor would be succeeded by his son, and not just one son, but 3 sons. Constantius II, named after Constantine's father, to rule over the east alone, with Constantine II and Constans to split rulership over the west. All 3 of them attacking paganism and supporting the Christian Church. In 340, Constantine II, 3 years after his father's death, turned on his brother and created a civil war. Constans was successful, and Constantine II was murdered, leading to Constans ruling over the west. In 350, he was betrayed, overthrown, and executed by Magentius, his junior ruler, who soon brought on the ire and retribution of the brother from the east, Constantius. Constantius went to the west, defeated Magentius, and then claimed the role of Augustus, the ruler of all the Roman Empire, for himself. He would rule competently and skillfully for the next 10 years, dying in 361, a very underrated Roman emperor, probably because of a giant shadow cast by his father. He would be succeeded by Julian, one of Rome's most notorious rulers. After the death of Constantine and the brutal civil wars and upheaval of the reigns of his 3 sons, it was Constantius II, his oldest, who, after taking over the east, also would succeed in conquering the west. Constantius would rule stably until 361, when he did what all great emperors do and died, leaving Julian, his cousin and the nephew of Constantine, to rule over the empire. Julian's reign was a short one, but a pivotal one. He is the last pagan emperor of Rome and tried to turn Rome away from its Christian course, bringing it back to a neo-paganism that reflected the Hellenism of the Greeks, probably akin to a Hadrian. A philosopher and writer, he was skeptical of religion and persecuted the Christian church. The renewed persecutions brought angst from the very, very powerful Christian community in Rome, and Julian, while trying to fight the Sassanids, the Persians, in the east, was killed when an arrow hit him after just 2 years on the throne. Rome would be thoroughly Christian, and so would its emperors from here on out. After Julian the Apostate had failed to bring Rome back to its pagan ways and had been brutally murdered in battle, he was succeeded by Jovian, for just a year, who was overthrown in 364 by Valentinian, Rome's best general. Valentinian I, or Valentinian the Great, established a new dynasty, secured the Roman borders, and stabilized the empire. Considered one of the last great emperors in the West and a stabilizing force, he kept it all in the family by promoting his incompetent brother Valens to the role of the Emperor of the East. He also promoted his son Gratian, who was only 8, to be his co-ruler in 367, and when Valentinian died after 11 years in 375, Gratian promoted his half-brother Valentinian II to the role of junior emperor at the age of 4. Valens oversaw them, but couldn't even oversee himself. He died at the Battle of Adrianople in 378, one of Rome's greatest defeats at the hands of the Goths and Fritigern, who had originally served the Romans. The Gothic hordes now threatened the east in its capital, Constantinople, while Milan had become the capital of the west, with Rome being seen as the spiritual center for both halves of the empire. The chaos would deepen as in 383 Gratian was murdered by Magentius Maximus, and the usurpations would only end with Rome's next great emperor, Theodosius.